Emily, is Grandpa behaving himself? Oh, yes. Well, kind of. Injuring his leg. Old people can be such a nuisance. I wish they'd think about those of us who have to take care of them. Patricia, that's not a nice way to say it. It's fine. He's already declining quite a bit. I can't handle the fuss of old people, but you're used to it, so you'll be fine. The other day, my husband's grandfather, Michael, fell in the garden and injured his leg. It's not a serious injury, but he's already 82 years old. Because of his age, we're having him rest in bed just to be safe, so it doesn't get worse. My mother-in-law won't even go near him, let alone take care of him. I'm Emily, 30 years old. I married 3 years ago and live with my husband Daniel's family. My husband was my boss at the company where I worked, a company founded by his grandfather. When I joined 8 years ago, my father-in-law was already the president, and my grandfather-in-law was the chairman. But back then, the grandfather was still handling all the important tasks and responsibilities of the company. 2 years ago, when Grandpa turned 80, he remained chairman, but handed over most of the public duties to my father-in-law. Michael, you've worked hard all this time. Now leave the company matters to Christopher and take it easy. My mother-in-law said with a smile, but her words sounded sarcastic to me. Grandfather-in-law is a bit stubborn, but a fair and kind person with a good reputation. In contrast, my father-in-law seems somewhat immature, never expressing his opinions clearly and utterly unreliable compared to Grandpa. And he always does whatever my mother-in-law says. My grandmother-in-law has already passed away, and I never met her. My husband and I started dating when we worked together on the same product planning team 3 years after I joined the company. My husband, who was energetically leading the team, seemed reliable to me, though a bit self-righteous. Maybe I felt that way because I lost my father early and grew up with just my mother. My mother also passed away from illness 2 years ago, and now I have no family other than my in-laws. Shortly after I got married, my mother fell ill and needed care, so I quit my job to take care of her. The fact that my husband's family didn't object was probably due to a single comment from Grandpa. It's only natural to take care of the mother who raised you alone. Don't worry and take good care of her. Thanks to that, I was able to be by my mother's side every day for a year without financial worries until she passed away. My mother-in-law seemed a bit dissatisfied, but I was truly grateful. However, since Grandpa handed over the company to my father-in-law, everyone's attitudes towards him has gradually changed. They no longer listen to his opinions as much. And I can't shake the feeling that they're treating him carelessly. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but watching my mother-in-law and husband's behavior, I can't help but feel that way. My father-in-law's attitude is non-committal, but it feels like he's ignoring Grandpa, as if he's no longer needed since he's practically retired. Watching my in-laws' behavior, I feel somewhat angry. Hey, don't you think your attitude, Patricia, and yours too, is a bit cold towards Grandpa? So what's the big deal? Grandpa tries to talk to you and you barely respond. You don't even try to help him. Like I have time to deal with old people. You can take care of Grandpa. You're the one with the free time. You don't have to talk like that. Quiet. I'm tired from work. Don't nag me about unnecessary things. This is how it goes. No matter what I say, they won't listen to me. My grandfather-in-law doesn't say anything to his family about this. Now I'm the only one who talks to my grandfather-in-law at home. Grandpa, the weather is nice today. Shall we go for a little walk outside? Your leg seems to be healing well, and I think it will be good rehabilitation. Thank you. Let's go out for a bit then. When the two of us went to the park, there were several families with children playing around. My grandfather-in-law looked at the scene with joy. Christopher and Daniel had times like that too. Grandpa? I was busy with work and couldn't take care of the children much. Maybe that's why I couldn't raise Christopher and Daniel properly. my grandfather-in-law said with a slightly sad face, almost like he was talking to himself. Christopher is my father-in-law, and Daniel is my husband. I think about how everyone can be kinder to my grandfather-in-law, but I can't come up with a good idea. But then, my in-laws suggested building a house for my grandfather-in-law. This house is over 50 years old, right? The layout is bad. It's hard to use, but instead of spending money on repairs, it would be better to build a new house in a more convenient location. A new house? Michael is getting older, and it's good that he only got injured last time, but we never know what will happen, so let's make the house barrier-free so we won't have trouble if care is needed. I see. We can even put Michael's room in the middle so everyone can take care of him easily. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Right, so it's settled then, and Michael, about the cost. If it's a house for all of us, I'll take care of it. Talk to Mr. Jones about the money. Typical Michael. Thank you, we appreciate it. My mother-in-law smiled happily. It seems to me that they only flatter him when they want money. But if everyone takes care of my grandfather-in-law after moving to the new house, I thought there could be nothing better. Mr. Jones is the company's in-house counsel and also manages my grandfather-in-law's personal assets. My grandfather-in-law liked his character and made him in-house counsel, and it's been nearly 30 years. He's 58 now and the person my grandfather-in-law trusts the most. I've met him several times, and he seems to be a very honest person. He always cares about my grandfather-in-law's health, and sometimes I think he's more like a son than his real sons. Having such people around my grandfather-in-law makes me feel a little relieved. I wasn't informed about where or what kind of house was being built, but my mother-in-law seemed very cheerful, and the three of them were looking at interior design magazines and discussing various things, so it seemed to be going smoothly. Then, something unexpected happened. It was revealed that my grandfather-in-law had a debt of $1,820,000. Wait, what's this about $1,820,000? My grandfather-in-law had become a co-signer for a loan for a friend's company. But that company was in trouble, and the debt had become my grandfather-in-law's responsibility. Wait, they're not going to take the house that's under construction, are they? Since the contract has already been completed, and as Patricia said, it's in the president's name, so it's fine. My mother-in-law seemed relieved at those words. Oh, thank goodness, I'm glad we did it my way. Listening to that conversation, I learned for the first time that the house was in my father-in-law's name. Even though my grandfather-in-law had paid for it, putting it in my father-in-law's name seemed just like something my mother-in-law would do. I also wondered why they didn't think of giving up the house to help repay the debt. Hey, this debt is Michael's fault, and it has nothing to do with us or the company, right? Well, it was signed in Michael's name. Oh, good. Then there's no problem. I couldn't understand what was good about it. But since my grandfather-in-law didn't say anything during that conversation, I didn't intervene either. After all, it's not an amount I could handle. And a few days later, my grandfather-in-law's behavior began to change gradually. Grandpa, what would you like to eat for lunch? Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 50. You have no right to call me that. Huh? Sorry, Emily. Right. I was lost in thought. At first I thought he was just deep in thought, but when it happened repeatedly, I began to feel uneasy. Patricia, what are you doing? Where's my meal? Grandpa, I'm Emily. Patricia is your daughter-in-law. You ate your meal earlier. I didn't eat. Are you trying to starve me? I wondered if my grandfather-in-law's condition was triggered by the $1,820,000 debt. And seeing that none of his family members were trying to help him might have been a double shock. What can I do for him? I tried to take my grandfather-in-law to the hospital, but he refused to go. He might not want to admit that he might have dementia. I don't want to force him, but I can't do anything on my own. I consulted my husband, but he only replied that it had nothing to do with him. I can't rely on my mother-in-law either. So I thought my father-in-law was the only option.
Yeah, I heard from Patricia and Daniel. They think it might be dementia.
Can you go to the hospital with us?
But it's not that bad yet, right? If we go to the hospital, others will find out. My father having dementia?
There are good medications now that can slow the progression.
Well, there's no need to rush. Let's watch him a little longer. Emily is here, so it'll be fine, right?
I can't help but think how unreliable these people are. I can't depend on them. Grandpa, let's go to the hospital. Let's get you properly examined.
Who are you? Where are you planning to take me? You're up to no good.
I almost cry, thinking about how my once kind grandfather-in-law has become so stubborn. But my mother-in-law just laughs, amused. Even if he was the chairman, it's over for him now. But now everything, even the company, is all Christopher's. Patricia, Grandpa isn't completely unaware. He's listening to everything. He'll forget everything soon. He'll start wandering, dribbling. Just thinking about it gives me chills. He's nothing but a nuisance now. How can you say that? Grandpa has worked hard for the family all his life. My mother-in-law's words make me angry and sad. But my grandfather-in-law just smiles. See? This old man doesn't understand anything. Patricia! I'm furious that my mother-in-law's laughing in words. But soon, the new house will be ready. Things might change once we move there. Since it's a house that Grandpa built, the family might show some gratitude and be kind to him. I couldn't completely abandon that faint hope. And 2 months later, the house was finally built. For days, I had been forced to pack my in-laws' and husband's belongings, while my father-in-law's and my things were mostly untouched. Even when I tried to pack my things, my in-laws and husband kept giving me tasks, so I couldn't make any progress. But I thought it would be fine to move the small things later, since this house wasn't going away. On moving day, after moving most of the things, I went to call my father-in-law, but my husband said, "Ah, you and Grandpa can stay here." What?
You can stay in this house. We don't need any extra baggage in the new house. In other words, you and Grandpa will live here from now on, and I'll give you Grandpa's debt too.
Well, you can at least be a housekeeper.
Hey, let's go.
Yeah, I'm coming. Good luck with all the debt repayment and live in care. With those words, my in-laws cheerfully got into the car and left. I was stunned for a while. I couldn't immediately understand what had just happened. Were we just abandoned? And not just me, but my grandfather-in-law too. Only they would live in the new house? It took me a while to understand, because it was beyond my imagination that someone could do something so cruel. How should I explain this to my grandfather-in-law? I slowly returned to the back room. I don't mind taking care of my grandfather-in-law at all. That was my intention from the start. As I was about to timidly call out to him, who was sitting with his back to me, he seemed to sense my presence and turned around before I could speak.
Have they gone already?
My grandfather-in-law's expression, as he said that, looked completely different from the dazed look he had just months ago. To be frank, he seemed like a different person. I thought maybe a different symptom had emerged, but the next moment, my grandfather-in-law smiled. And then, his following words surprised me. As I was talking to my grandfather-in-law, Mr. Jones came.
Chairman, have you finished getting rid of the unnecessary staff? Yes, it's all done. Let's go, shall we?
Where are we going?
Of course, to the new house.
I left the house where I had been living, led by my grandfather-in-law, without understanding what was happening. The next month, countless calls came from my mother-in-law and husband. My grandfather-in-law said he wouldn't deal with them anymore, but I answered my husband's call because of the divorce.
Hey, Emily, is Grandpa with you? When I went to the old house, it was for sale, It's not worth $1,820,000, so you can't repay the debt. Is that why you did that?
What do you mean?
Put Grandpa on. Dad said he can't get in touch at all. That forgetful old man has done something outrageous.
I knew what he was talking about, but I wanted to hear what my husband would say.
Grandpa sold the company's stocks to the executive director. Thanks to that, the executive director became the largest shareholder. And a shareholders' meeting and board meeting were held, and Dad was dismissed as president.
But the executive director is well liked, and maybe Grandpa thought he was better to hand over the company to.
The executive director must have deceived the senile old man into selling the stocks. This is invalid.
You seem to be misunderstanding something. But Grandpa doesn't have dementia. If anything, he seems more coherent than before.
What?
I, too, until that moving day, had seriously thought that my grandfather-in-law had dementia. It seems that my grandfather-in-law had been suspicious from the time my mother-in-law said she would build a house to live with him. So he devised a plan. He pretended to have dementia to see how my in-laws and husband would react. As expected, they showed their true colors one after another. In the end, they left my grandfather-in-law and me behind.
I struggled to hold back my laughter because everything went exactly as I expected,
my grandfather-in-law said. I was surprised, relieved, and a little conflicted.
To deceive the enemy, you must first deceive your allies.
He laughed. He seemed to have been getting regular updates on the company from the executive director and Mr. Jones. With my grandfather-in-law gone, my father-in-law and husband did as they pleased. Self-righteous, completely ignoring the opinions of the employees. Constant entertaining at the company's expense. He handed over the company to my father-in-law, but he was worried about the future, so he took this measure. In the end, he decided he couldn't entrust it to his son and left it to the executive director.
What about the $1,820,000 debt?
That's gone now. Indeed, my grandfather-in-law had been a guarantor for a friend's debt, but he also owned personal assets that exceeded that. After stepping back from the company's operations, he had invested in real estate and made a considerable profit. So there was no problem at all. But if I had said that, it was clear that my mother-in-law and husband would target it. That's why I only talked about the debt. The friend was the son of a benefactor who had helped my father-in-law when he was young. Moreover, since then, the countryside land that the son owned was going to be developed into a resort, and he was able to sell it at a high price, so there was no need to take on the debt.
You're kidding.
But more importantly, are you guys okay?
We're not okay. Both my father and I were denounced by the company. What should we do now?
Well, there's also the mortgage on the house.
What? What do you mean, the mortgage on the house?
Huh? Haven't you realized it yet?
The house money should have been all paid by Grandpa.
Maybe you don't remember what Grandpa said at that time. When my mother-in-law talked to my grandfather-in-law about the money, he had set the condition that if it's a house where everyone, including me, will live. In other words, if that wasn't the case, he wouldn't pay. Even if the house was in my father-in-law's name, my grandfather-in-law intended to pay if everyone was living together. That's just because you assumed Grandpa would pay and didn't look at the documents properly, right? Christopher signed without checking everything. It shows he really didn't have the qualities of a president.
You're kidding.
Afterward, my parents-in-law ended up losing the house they had built because they couldn't pay the mortgage. Now they live in an old apartment over 50 years old and are struggling to pay off the unpaid loan. My mother-in-law and husband have been contacting me alternately, saying we should all live together, but that's impossible now. My grandfather-in-law has retired from his chairman position, and now he has bought an old house in the countryside, and we are living together.
Emily, you can go and live wherever you like freely. You don't have to worry about living expenses.
My grandfather-in-law told me, but I chose to be with him. If I'm not in the way, please let me be with you. When I said that, my grandfather-in-law's eyes welled up with tears. Thanks to Mr. Jones, the divorce was finalized and procedures were taken to exclude my former father-in-law and former husband from inheritance, and I became my grandfather-in-law's adopted daughter. If anything happens to my grandfather-in-law, who has become my father, I intend to take care of him until the end. Now the two of us enjoy working in the fields together. Dad, look at this radish. It's big. In the pouring sunlight, warm moments flow. I wish for these days to continue even one day longer.
My name is Kayona, a 30-year-old housewife. 2 years ago, I married my husband Naoki, who is 6 years older than me, and since then, we've been living in his parents' home. In this house, we live with Robert and Barbara. Both are in their 60s, and thankfully they're in good health and full of energy. Being energetic is generally a good thing, but Barbara loves to go out and have fun. I don't know if it started when I moved in or if it's always been this way, but she hardly does any housework. She was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom since she never worked, but she'd say, "Okay, Yona, dinner isn't ready yet. You had plenty of time, didn't you?" She'd push the chores onto me, go out to play, and if things weren't done when she came back, she'd make snide remarks. I've been dealing with this, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Mother-in-law, I'm sorry, but I did tell you before you left that I might not finish all this." "Huh? What are you complaining about? It's only natural to do this much, right? This is why I have trouble with your millennial generation. I wish you'd learn from Naoki." If it were just the snide remarks, I could handle it, but Barbara always brags about Naoki. Especially since Naoki works for a large company, which seems to be a great source of pride for Barbara. "Naoki works so hard every day, but his wife is a failure." That was Barbara's favorite phrase. As for my husband, he didn't show any signs of standing up for me. At dinner, Barbara would start complaining about me. "Today, Kayona did this." And all my husband would do was respond with a disinterested, "Oh, really?" When we first met, I thought he was mature because he was older, but now it's different. It seems like he thinks of me as a convenient housemaid. Even when I'm doing housework late into the night, he doesn't say a word to me. Instead, he throws laundry at me, aiming for my face, saying, "Hey, this too." I regret marrying such a person. Whether it's a way to vent his work stress or something else, my husband has changed dramatically since we got married. Our first anniversary, he bought a cake, but then he threw a pie in my face, laughing. You wouldn't think he's a 36-year-old man. However, there's a glimmer of hope in this life. That's the presence of my father-in-law, Robert. Robert is a very calm person, always saying, "Thank you, Kayona," and "Is there anything difficult? I'll help you." The only person who treats me kindly in this house is Robert. Since I quit my job when I got married, he's the only person I can chat with. I've come to adore Robert like a real father. However, Robert works as a senior staff member at the company he used to work for, so he's not home during the day. The reality is that Robert spends little time at home, and I spend a lot of time alone with Barbara. When I'm talking to Robert, Barbara doesn't say anything. But it seems she doesn't like it, and her attitude has gotten worse. "Don't make eyes at your father-in-law. Just because Naoki doesn't pay attention to you, you're going to go after his father? It's disgusting." She started saying things like that. Of course, she would say these things where Robert couldn't hear. I pushed back against this. "That's not true at all." "Oh my, did I hit a nerve? You're even raising your voice. How unbecoming." No matter what I say, she has a comeback. Our conversations are always like this, never really connecting. I talked to my husband about this. I thought he would understand that this was just Barbara's delusion, but he just laughed and said, "So you're even into men over 60. You're really open-minded." I knew it was hopeless. I had no expectations that my husband would do anything about the housework or Barbara's bullying, but I never expected him to say something like this. It was a huge shock. I started to feel like I didn't belong in this house. One summer day, Barbara said to me, "I'm thinking of going on a family trip when Naoki gets his summer vacation." I thought, here she goes again, always wanting to go out. But then she said, "You're coming too, right, Kayona?" I didn't expect to be invited. I thought they would go without me. "Me too? Don't you want to?" "No, it's not that." I found it suspicious. What does Barbara want to do inviting me? I was suspicious, but I didn't know what she would say if I refused. That night, my husband asked me again, "You're going on the trip, right?" Yeah, I was invited. When I answered, my husband burst out laughing for some reason. What's so funny? Nothing, really. Something was definitely off and my anxiety grew. On the day of the trip, we headed out to our destination with my husband driving. Robert was going to join us later because of work. So it was just me, my husband, and Barbara in the car. My husband was driving. Barbara was in the passenger seat and I was in the back seat. I could only catch glimpses of their expressions, which made me anxious. "Keona, you withdrew some money for the trip, right?" Barbara asked me. "Yes, a few $100s. That's good." Barbara seemed to be smirking when she heard this. After driving for a while, I noticed that we had passed the sign for the inn where we were supposed to stay. "Didn't we just pass the inn?" I asked. "There's a tourist spot ahead. We'll check in after we see it," my husband answered. He was half smiling, clearly unable to hide something strange. As we drove further from the inn, the surrounding area became greener. I sighed quietly, making sure the two of them didn't hear me. And then we arrived at a dam. To be honest, it wasn't a big dam and there weren't many people around. It was far from a tourist spot. "Come on, let's get out of the car," Barbara urged. "Don't leave any belongings in the car, it could be dangerous," my husband added, and I did as they said. I was about to get out of the car, but Barbara and my husband were saying things like, "Oh, I should take off my jewelry just in case." "Oops, I still have something in my pocket," pretending to be busy and not getting out of the car. I got out of the car and closed the door. Then I heard the sound of the lock clicking. My husband cracked the driver's and passenger's windows slightly open. My husband was laughing uproariously. "Okay, Ona, what are you doing getting out here? Are you planning to stay here tonight?" I was furious at Barbara, but I held it in. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "You got out on your own, didn't you?" My husband was laughing so hard he was holding his stomach. My wallet and cell phone were all in the car. Everything had gone according to Barbara and my husband's plan. "Well, Keona, enjoy yourself," Barbara said with a smirk. "Eat some grass and sleep outside." My husband, holding my wallet and flipping through it, closed the window. His laughter faded away, and then my husband and Barbara drove off. "Well, they're a handful, and it's hot," I muttered. It was the height of summer, and I was at risk of dehydration, but I wasn't panicking at all. An hour later, "Why are you here?" My husband was shocked to see me. Yes, I was in the lobby of the inn where we were supposed to stay. "Are you a ghost? Did something happen at the dam?" Barbara looked like she was about to faint. I thought about pretending to be a ghost, but decided against it. "I'm not a ghost, and I'm staying here tonight." I showed them the key to my room. By the way, I had already left my luggage in the room. My husband, who couldn't understand the situation, was losing his cool. He seemed to think I had taken the key to their room without permission. "What are you doing? Give it back now!" He tried to snatch the key from me roughly. At that moment, a man appeared and grabbed my husband's hand. "Sir, please refrain from causing a disturbance here." He was about the same age as Robert, but he had a sturdy physique and was taller, making him seem more reliable than my middle-aged, slightly overweight husband. "Who are you? Are you staff here? Do you think it's okay to do this to a guest?" "Exactly why we'll sue you for assault." Barbara also joined in, yelling at the man who had intervened. "I apologize for not introducing myself earlier. I am the owner of this inn." The man introduced himself politely. Hearing that he was the owner, my husband quickly withdrew his hand. Actually, I knew this owner. When I was in college, I came to this area on a trip with my friends during the summer vacation. I remember it was really hot that day. We didn't have much money at the time, so we were walking to our accommodation, complaining about the heat. We didn't know the area, and none of us, including me, were good at reading maps. As a result, we got lost and ended up in a place with few people. There, a girl was collapsed on the side of the road. That girl was Mary, the owner's daughter. We quickly called an ambulance and took care of her until it arrived. The next day, the owner came to the small inn where we were staying and thanked us profusely, saying, "You saved my daughter's life. Thank you so much." He also said, "We run an inn too, so we'd like to invite you next time you come. Of course, you don't have to pay." Since then, my family and I have visited the inn several times. That's why I knew the owner of this inn. The owner, who was reprimanding my husband and Barbara, was polite and courteous, but I could tell he was very angry. In fact, both the owner and I knew about this low-level plan of Barbara and my husband from the beginning. I noticed their plan 2 weeks ago. I thought it was suspicious that they invited me on a trip, so I set up a voice recorder in the living room. I targeted the times when my husband and Barbara were alone, such as when I was taking a bath or doing laundry, and their plan came to light. "How about we leave Keona somewhere?" "That would be hilarious. Oh, how about here? There's a gym about an hour's drive from the inn." I was shocked when I heard it. I immediately called the inn and consulted with the owner. I told him everything about the situation I was now in and what was planned for the future. The owner was very angry. His own daughter had once collapsed in the blazing sun, so he was even more upset. And today, the owner, who knew the situation in advance, had arranged for my pickup. After waiting for my husband and Barbara's car to leave, he had me ride in the inn's shuttle. By the way, the driver was Mary from that time. "I got my license. Let's go for a drive next time." "We're driving right now." "Oh, right." We chatted happily, bought some local specialty ice cream on the way, and arrived at the inn. I knew about the plan and that a pickup was coming, but I was still scared. For Mary, this area was like her backyard. She knew a shortcut, so we arrived at the inn several tens of minutes earlier than my husband and Barbara. "You mentioned suing earlier, ma'am." The owner looked at Barbara with stern eyes. "Yes, I did. It's outrageous to be accused of the opposite." "I'm sorry, but you're not our guests." "What?" "Don't mess with us." My husband and Barbara both lost their tempers. "Your and your mother's reservations have been canceled," I added. "You! Who do you think you are?" My husband was about to lose his temper again, so the owner restrained him. "Keona did nothing wrong. We, the inn, canceled your reservations." "What do you mean?" "If you left a woman alone at the dam in the mountains after stealing her wallet, wouldn't you be the perpetrators of a crime? We can't allow such people to stay at our inn. We also call the police." At this, my husband and mother-in-law became even more furious. "What are you talking about? This is no joke." "Don't you think you can get away with this? I work at our company, this little inn in the mountains." Just then, Robert arrived late. Hey, what's going on here?" Sensing the tense atmosphere, Robert looked around at everyone and asked, "What's going on here?" These inn people are weird." "Let's stay somewhere else. They're incredibly rude." Barbara and my husband appealed to Robert. Rather than listening to the agitated pair, Robert started asking me and the owner about the situation. And when he heard what had happened, he was furious. "You idiots!" It was the first time I had seen Robert yell. "How embarrassing! I can't believe we're from the same family. You two, get out of here now." My husband and mother-in-law were taken aback by Robert's outburst. "Get out? Where to? Another inn?" Barbara said something so stupid that he added, "From here and from home." "Wait a minute, that's not possible, Dad," my husband said with a wry smile, but Robert was firm. "You're disowned. Get out now. Don't make me say it again." He pushed my husband away. Then, the police really did show up, and my husband and Barbara turned pale. The owner and I explained the situation to the officer. I also had a voice recorder, so I played back the conversation for them. My husband and Barbara started crying, but Robert quickly said, "Quiet down, you're disturbing the inn. Officer, please take them away." "It's not like that, officer. We didn't think it would be such a big deal. It was just a prank," my husband and Barbara said, but the officer's expressions changed. "A prank? Are you serious? Don't you think that your little prank could cost someone their life, especially your own wife?" They were scolded harshly. They weren't arrested because it was a family dispute, but Barbara and my husband were pale throughout. "This isn't over. Keona's feelings will determine your future, understand?" With those final words, my husband and Barbara, still pale, went home. Afterwards, Robert seemed apologetic the whole time. He kept repeating, "I'm really, really sorry. I can't apologize enough," for not noticing the unpleasant experiences I had been having and for the terrible ordeal I went through today. He also deeply apologized to the owner of the inn, saying, "I'm sorry for this. Despite being in a position where we always receive your hospitality, we cause such trouble. Actually, this owner is a businessman who runs several other companies and is also a client of the company where Robert works. Without knowing any of this, my husband had boasted, "I work for a big company." I'm glad I was able to punish my husband and Barbara, but it's also very scary to think what would have happened if I hadn't known about their plan in advance. I prayed that being scolded by the police would make them realize the gravity of the situation. After returning from the inn, I divorced my husband, of course. I also demanded a hefty alimony. I hope they reflect on their actions and don't do the same thing to anyone else in the future. By the way, I heard that Robert and Barbara also got divorced. Robert cut ties with my ex-husband and kicked him out of the house. My ex-husband was advised to resign due to the incident. Apparently, his workplace bullying had already been a problem. Just as he had been nasty to me, he had been harsh to his juniors and colleagues, and it seems that the HR department was planning to take action anyway. I'm disappointed in myself for marrying such a person. My ex-husband, who lost his job, seems to have been working hard to find another one, but it's not going well. He should be in a managerial position given his age, but he doesn't have that track record at his previous company, and he can't clearly explain why he left. Barbara was kicked out by Robert and seems to have turned to relatives at her parents' home. But she's rumored to be a spendthrift who loves to travel. They fear she'll deplete their savings if she comes to live with them. I think she should get a part-time job or something since she's still in good health. I also left my in-laws' house and I'm living alone nearby. I'm still in good terms with Robert, and sometimes I consult with him about work problems. And I, who was a stay-at-home mom, started a new life. When I was job hunting, I was approached. "Kayona, would you like to work at my company?" It was from the owner. He was very concerned about what happened to me afterwards. He seemed to be looking for a position in his company where I could work. I was happy to accept. I was very grateful. Thank you so much for doing all this for me. No, we're the ones who should be grateful. We can't thank you enough. I feel like I've already repaid the favor from that time and need to give back the change. The company he introduced me to is a reputable company that meets labor conditions. It was a surprise on top of a surprise. By the way, it's in the same industry as the big company my ex-husband was boasting about, but its capital is 5 times larger. Everyone working there is also very nice. I'm having more fulfilling and enjoyable days than when I was struggling with my married life.
Call the police! I had saved $300,000 for my retirement, but for some reason, it vanished when my eldest son moved out. While my second son is arranging for the police, I contacted my eldest son. Then he yelled at me, "Stop it!" I was shocked, but I had already reported it to the police. My name is Susan. When I was young, I moved to New York City to work, and I had 2 sons. Both my sons are now 18 years old, and my husband passed away early. I've reached 60 and retired. I had saved $300,000 for my retirement, so I'm not too worried about living expenses. Still, it's time to think about my future living arrangements. During this time, my eldest son, Robert, who had always lived in our parents' house, decided to move out. Robert's wife, Mary, had expressed her dissatisfaction to my eldest son, saying that she didn't want to take care of me in the past. I had expected this conversation someday. I have no desire to be looked after by my eldest son's wife. In fact, my eldest son's wife can't even cook or do household chores, so I've been doing it for both of them all along. Have you found a place yet?
Not yet, but we plan to decide soon.
Let me know when the move is settled. Richard and the others say they will take me on a trip to celebrate my retirement soon.
Understood. I'm saving money now, and I'll leave once I have enough.
I reported my eldest son's situation to my second son over the phone. My second son said,
In that case, How about installing security cameras? Without Robert around, you might be an easy target for burglars.
That's true. I've heard on the news that seniors living alone are often targeted. Moreover, the trip I'm taking with my second son and his wife is a bit longer this time. I was certainly anxious about leaving the house empty for an extended period. I quickly purchased the security cameras that my second son had researched for me. They should arrive tomorrow. Little did I know they would come in handy later. Sometime after hearing about my eldest son and his wife moving out, my eldest son's wife approached me about moving expenses.
Mother-in-law, can we borrow little money for our moving expenses? I've actually been let go from my part-time job. Without some help, we won't have enough for the move.
Fired from a part-time job? What on earth did you do?
Mother-in-law, please, lend us the money.
Upon my eldest son's wife's desperate plea, I reluctantly agreed and gave her the money for moving and enough to live on for a while. Make sure you pay it back.
Yes.
She always responds well. But that's about it, I thought, criticizing my eldest son's wife inwardly as I considered talking to my eldest son. A few days passed. My eldest son seemed uninterested in preparing for the move, so I asked him about it. Then I came to know a shocking truth. I lent the moving expenses to Mary the other day, so shouldn't you be able to move now?
Huh? I don't know about that.
What? I was shocked and opened my eyes wide. She said she'd pay it back after moving, didn't she?
I don't know about that. How much did you lend her?
About $3,000.
What? There's no way we can pay that back. I'm a temporary worker, you know.
But Mary said she needed the loan. I couldn't hide my surprise. Just then, my eldest son's wife came home. I hurried to the entrance and confronted her about what she had done with the moving money.
I'm sorry, I spent it. But you have money, mother-in-law. So, $3,000 isn't a big deal, right?
That's not the point at all. What on earth did you spend it on?
Designer bags and new clothes. The new ones were so cute. But I can't spend money until I find a part-time job. Don't worry, I'll pay you back as soon as I find a part-time work. Little by little.
I was at a loss for words at my eldest son's wife's statement. I've retired, so I need that money back. You understand that, don't you?
I understand, so quit nagging. Is this what they call wife bullying? Ugh, I just want to leave this house as soon as possible.
My eldest son's wife just kept saying whatever she wanted. I regretted lending her the money and wondered why I had done so. Today, my second son Richard was scheduled to come home. Richard has a 1-year-old child, and his wife, Beth, is a hard worker, currently on maternity leave. He had promised to take me on a trip next time, so we were planning to decide on the dates. Since my eldest son hadn't returned from his temp job yet, it was just me and my eldest son's wife at home. Mary, Richard, and the others are coming today. Can you help me out?
Me? Huh? I can't cook or anything. I just got my nails done the other day. Well, can you set the plates or do the shopping? Richard and the others are coming for lunch. You like Richard more than Robert, don't you, mother-in-law? That's not true. I just want to spend some quality time since it's been a while since we have seen them. When I said that, my eldest son's wife had a clearly dissatisfied look on her face. I don't intend to favor one brother over the other, but since it's been a while since we've seen each other, it's natural to give a little preferential treatment. Although, my eldest son's wife has some challenges in her personality. I have never compared her to Beth. Though that's the case, my eldest son's wife doesn't like my second son's wife and always takes a confrontational attitude. When my second son and his wife arrived at the house, my eldest son's wife stared at my second son's wife. Wearing something plain again today? Can't you put a little effort into it, especially in front of mother-in-law? It's frustrating how she says things to elevate me, things she's never even thought of herself. Don't worry about it, she's just in a bad mood. I try to provide support with those words, but my second son's wife looks down, appearing apologetic. My second son's wife is always bullied by my eldest son's wife, like this. I try my best to defend my second son's wife, but it seems my eldest son's wife doesn't like that either. When I return to the kitchen, I admonish my eldest son's wife. Mary, can't you get along with Beth a little better? I do want to get along, but I just don't like that gloomy woman. Mother-in-law, please stop favoring her over me. I don't intend to. Is it because she has a grandchild? I'm certainly happy about the grandchild, but that's not why I would favor her. My eldest son's wife glances at me and snorts dismissively. I wonder if she understands. Why don't you let that woman help with this? Beth has to take care of the child too. I knew it. You favor her because she has a grandchild. My eldest son's wife says this, starts to sulk, and begins to relax with the drink, refusing to help with anything. I wanted to say that she's not a child, but I held back and let my eldest son's wife have her way. After a while, I heard the sound of my eldest son's wife arguing with my second son and his wife. Rushing over, I found my eldest son's wife, drunk, trying to grab at my second son's wife. My second son was desperately trying to stop her. What on earth are you doing? I just can't stand this woman. So what if she has a child? You think she's making fun of me? Then my second son's wife apologized, looking guilty. I didn't realize that my sister-in-law was so bothered. I showed pictures of Emma and... You don't have to apologize. Mary's the one acting strangely. She suddenly got angry and tried to grab Beth. Putting their stories together, it seemed that the origin of the matter was my eldest son's wife teasing my second son and his wife. The story was that the eldest son's wife, fueled by alcohol, had become furious when the second son's wife remained silent in response to her incomprehensible complaints. What's wrong? I'm not in the wrong. I don't like this woman or my mother-in-law. I've decided to move out, and I feel relieved. My eldest son's wife screamed, starting to throw any dishes or glasses within her reach. I quickly moved my second son's wife and grandson away from her, while my second son desperately tried to restrain his wife. Then, my eldest son came home and was stunned to see the disastrous state of the room. My second son and his wife had come to visit after a long time, and now this. Later, my eldest son took charge of his wife and the situation temporarily calmed down. As we cleaned up the messy room, my second son's wife looked apologetic. There had been arguments since my second son and his wife came to the house, but the travel plans were safely arranged. My second son and his wife left with smiles on their faces. And just when I was feeling relieved, my eldest son called me into the living room. By the way, my eldest son's wife had become drunk and fallen asleep.
We've decided to move out earlier. We'll leave next weekend.
What? Is money going to be okay? What about the house?
Mary said she'll handle it. I want to keep the moving costs down, so I'd like you and Richard to help us.
That's fine, but Richard left earlier. We'll have to contact him.
Can you reach out to him for me? It's hard for me to ask after what happened earlier.
I understand. I agreed right away. Perhaps my eldest son's wife will feel a little more relaxed once she's away from this house. I had been thinking that maybe my eldest son's wife felt strange pressure because I was around. After the earlier dispute, I might not be able to see my eldest son and his wife. But I thought that if they could spend their time peacefully, it would be good. I called my second son and his wife, who had just returned home, and explained the situation. My second son and his wife agreed with my thoughts and gladly accepted to help with the move. And today was the day my eldest son and his wife were moving out. I watched the two of them leave and then returned to the living room. Actually, I was planning to go on a trip with my second son and his wife starting tomorrow. Thank you. I hope the two of them can finally settle down.
It's all right. I really hope they can settle down.
While my second son and his wife are taking a break with coffee and cookies, I return to my room and start preparing for the trip. If it's a trip, it will surely cost a lot of money. Thinking so, when I opened the chest with the banking card inside, I was stunned. This is terrible. As I rushed down to the living room, my second son and his wife looked at me, dumbfounded. The savings! The banking card I was saving for a retirement is gone! At my words, my second son and his wife's eyes widened in shock. A thief? When did this happen? What should we do? As I was panicking, my second son's wife hesitantly asked, "How much was in it?" $300,000. At my words, my second son and his wife were frozen. "Call the police! It must be a thief!" I yelled to my second son, and he hurriedly pulled out his mobile phone. Wait,
What about my eldest son and his wife? They moved without knowing a thief had been in the house, so they might have trouble if something was missing. I called my eldest son. Robert, a thief! A thief was in our house. We didn't notice at all. But please check carefully when you unpack to make sure nothing was stolen. Huh? What do you mean? My banking card is gone. There was $300,000 in it. Surprised, my eldest son paused for a moment and then nervously uttered something to confirm. $300,000? Is that true? Yes, I've been saving it for my retirement since Dad passed away. We're contacting the police now. As I desperately pleaded, my eldest son exclaimed, "What?" in an unusually loud voice. Wait, hold on. No, that is... As my eldest son panicked, my second son's wife turned the conversation to me. I know you're talking, but doesn't this house have security cameras? In the rooms? That's right. There was one in that room too. Shall we check it? Hearing this, I hurriedly pulled out the computer from the chest. I'm not familiar with the detailed use of a computer, but since using a mobile phone to view the security cameras was hard to remember, my second son gave me an old computer. I handed the computer to my second son's wife. After skillfully operating the computer, my second son's wife was shocked and speechless. I watched my second son's wife's reaction and feeling suspicious, I peered into the screen, where I saw. At that moment, the voice of my eldest son, still on the line, echoed. No, don't call the police! Mary might get falsely suspected! In shock and astonishment, I listened to my eldest son's desperate plea. 30 minutes later, my eldest son hurriedly drove back. Facing my eldest son and his wife, anger was slowly welling up inside me. Did you already call them? It's just a little misunderstanding. Let me explain. Please don't involve the police. I'm sorry. I've already reported it. More importantly, can you explain what's going on? As I said this, my eldest son looked apologetically at his wife, who ignored him without showing any sign of remorse. I felt anger towards my eldest son's wife. I heard this was given to me. But more than that, if you call the police, Mary will get caught. I'll return this. Can't you forgive us? My eldest son said this, handing me a banking card. It had already been used for moving expenses and apartment fees. This was what my eldest son's wife meant by somehow taking care of it. The security camera clearly showed my eldest son's wife taking the banking card from my chest. This is my retirement money. Why did you take it without asking? I was treated horribly here. I thought I'd keep it as a compensation. I've never treated you badly. I never forced anything on you. And you had 3 proper meals a day, didn't you? What exactly are you unhappy about? As I said this, my eldest son's wife's face turned red, and her eyes narrowed in anger. I've suffered more mental distress than Beth. Being called to the house on purpose, it felt like I was being told to show my grandchild, and it was painful. My eldest son's wife made such a delusional claim
I still couldn't forgive her. Stealing someone's belongings is what a thief does. Do you understand that? I lived in this house too, so it's also mine. Calling me a thief is just cruel. My eldest son's wife said this and began to cry. My eldest son begged me. Please forgive her. I beg you, Mom. Did they think I would forgive such a thing? I felt anger welling up even towards my irresponsible eldest son. Listening to the exchange between me and my eldest son's wife, my second son slammed the table and stood up. You've been saying whatever you like all this time. The second son glared at the eldest son's wife with an angry face. After all Mom has done for you, how can you act like this? As far as I can see, Mom has always been good to Mary. And Robert, too. You should tell her when something's wrong. She's your wife, isn't she? He shifted his angry gaze to the eldest son as well, who could only gulp and break into a cold sweat. It can't be helped. I don't know. It's not about knowing. Why weren't you watching properly? Because Robert isn't responsible, she acts however she wants. Besides, this is Mom's house, not Mary's. It's unimaginable that she could just take whatever she likes. The second son said this, pointing at the eldest son's wife. The eldest son's wife looked at the second son with a disgusted face. What's your problem? A mama's boy? I'm the one who's wrong? That's rude for a brother-in-law. Of course it's wrong. You've been complaining about Beth all this time. Why does my wife have to be criticized by someone like you? You don't know how much Beth has been troubled by this. The second son's words seemed to have pressured the eldest son's wife, who looked away and hung her head. To calm the second son down, the second son's wife hastily speaks to him. The second son has cooled down a bit but still glared at the eldest son's wife. I'm sorry, it's true that I let Mary do whatever she wanted. And I had given up, thinking that even if I said something, it wouldn't be heeded. The eldest son said this, looking down. Take my side! The eldest son's wife demanded of the eldest son, but he just shook his head. How cruel! I thought you would support me. Just stop it. The fact is, you did steal. When the eldest son said this, the eldest son's wife knocked a nearby vase off the table and turned away with an unhappy face. Suddenly, the police rushed in, looking alarmed. They must have been startled by the loud noise inside. They restrained the unruly eldest son's wife and turned to face us. I averted my eyes from the police, glancing quickly at the security camera. The police saw that and confirmed that the eldest son's wife had stolen the banking card before taking her into custody. Robert, say something! Help me! It's hopeless now. Why would you say that? You've been too selfish. I don't know why you did this. I can't defend you. The eldest son said this, looking away from his wife and hanging his head. Let's divorce. Upon hearing those words, the eldest son's wife stopped in shock, seizing her resistance. Wait, Robert? Are you sure? I tried to warn her at first, but she never listened. She ignores me when things go wrong. And now this. I can't bear it anymore. I can't be her husband any longer. The eldest son was also in turmoil. I couldn't bring myself to blame the eldest son knowing that. Perhaps it was because he was my son.
even after all that had happened. The eldest son watched Mary being taken away by the police, then slumped down, disheartened. Later on, it was revealed that Mary had apparently committed marriage fraud as well. The eldest son found out and was once again shocked. Mary was told she couldn't escape a prison sentence, and so the eldest son and his wife divorced. The eldest son's wife had to pay back the money from the marriage fraud and compensate the eldest son. The eldest son offered to take on some of the payment of the marriage fraud money. He said he wanted to settle things with himself as he hadn't. I went on a trip with my second son and his wife. Spending a long time with my young grandchildren was so much fun. Now, I am living with my eldest son again. He has a debt to pay off, so he's quitting his temp job and is working hard as a full-time employee, moving forward with determination. I'm happy to see my once unreliable eldest son growing little by little.
My name is Kayla. I graduated from college 5 years ago. I moved out and started living on my own when I began college. That's because my father was a bit of an eccentric person. I was his first child, but he had hoped for a boy. When I was born a girl, he didn't even try to hide his disappointment and was hard on my mother. Even as I grew up, my father never accepted me as his daughter and hardly showed me any love. I have no fond memories of my father from my childhood. All I remember are his cold eyes and the many words he used to reject me. My mother protected me and showered me with love. Even taking on the role of my father, I was able to endure my father's harsh treatment thanks to her. 6 years later, Emery was born. My father was disappointed again that it was a girl, but something changed, and he started to adore Emery. However, his attitude towards me remained the same. It was clear that he treated Emery and me differently. As I went through elementary, middle, and high school, I was treated by my father as if I didn't exist. On the other hand, Emery was praised by my father for even the smallest things, and he bragged about how cute she was, like a little doll. In contrast, the way he would sigh and say, "Oh, but Kayla," was quite a shock to me. My mother would comfort me, saying, "Kayla is different from Emery, but she's very cute too." But it didn't resonate with my shattered confidence. When I went to college, I decided to move out and live on my own. I loved my mother, but I had no feelings for my father, who showed no interest in me. I couldn't bear to live with him any longer. He reluctantly paid my college admission fee, but declared that he would not help with tuition or living expenses. He said that if there was any money, it would be used for Emery. I had to hustle to make ends meet through scholarships and part-time jobs. My college life was consumed by studies and work, with no room for the typical joys of youth. I had almost no connection with my family during my student days. My mother would contact me occasionally, but there was no communication from my father or Emery, and I didn't reach out to them either. When I was job hunting after graduation, the most important thing for me was the salary. I had to repay half of the scholarship I received, and I knew from my part-time work how important income was. With the recommendation from my senior professor and my hungry spirit in the interviews, I secured a job offer from my first-choice global consulting firm. My mother was thrilled as if it were her own achievement, but my father and Emery showed no reaction. I thought I was prepared for that, but it still left me feeling lonely and empty. Reaching a state of enlightenment isn't so easy, is it? I threw myself into my work once I joined the company. I think I needed a place to channel these lingering feelings of frustration. Thanks to that, I learned my job faster than any of my peers. With support from my seniors, I was able to satisfy major clients and secure ongoing contracts. I was steadily climbing the ladder of success. My income was rising in proportion to my achievements. 5 years into my career, I had grown into a leader, trusted with multiple projects. During this successful period at work, I received a call from my father, who I hadn't heard from in years.
"Your mother's had an accident and is paralyzed on one side. I want you to come home and take care of her. You're probably just loafing around, so I'll give you a task."
I was shocked to hear that my mother needed care after an accident. I hadn't told my father about my job, so he had assumed that I was unemployed and useless. But more than that, I was worried about the misfortune that had befallen my mother. I didn't want to return home, but my desire to help my beloved mother was stronger. I immediately applied for remote work at my company. Fortunately, my global company was ahead of others in allowing telework, and the environment was in place. I decided not to cancel the lease on my current apartment, thinking it might be best to keep it, even though it seemed wasteful to pay rent. So, I returned to my family home, taking only what I needed. It had been about 9 years since I left home to go to college. My mother's condition was more serious than I had thought. She was paralyzed on one side and couldn't walk on her own. Luckily, her mind was unaffected, and she could speak normally, but her immobile body looked very painful. I confronted my father about why he hadn't contacted me for the several months since my mother's accident and her home care, but he was as indifferent as ever, saying,
"Telling you wouldn't make her better. I called you this time because I had no choice."
Indeed, I, not being a doctor, couldn't do anything to help my mother recover. But I couldn't believe a father who wouldn't inform his daughter about her mother's plight. Months after my mother became immobile, the house was in a terrible state. Clothes were strewn everywhere, dishes were piled high in the sink, and the rooms were covered in dust and garbage. My mother's care had been completely neglected, and her back was covered in bed sores. I had no expectations of my father, but Emery was supposed to be living there too. What had Emery been doing? The answer became clear with her first words. "I can't do housework, so I can't take care of Mom either. I'm relieved now that Kayla's back." Emery, spoiled as she grew up, had become a self-centered person who couldn't do anything around the house. I started by cleaning the rooms. The mess and the dirt that had accumulated over several months couldn't be fixed in a day, and I spent nearly a week on this task. It took me that long because I had to care for my mother during that time. My mother kept saying she was sorry to have me care for her, but I cheerfully and energetically attended to her, hoping she would get better. While I was engaged in housework and caregiving, neither my father nor Emery did anything to help. Far from helping, my father would complain.
"The food tastes awful. What are you slacking off for? You're clumsy at taking care of your mother. You have plenty of time since you're just loafing around. Do it properly."
To him, it was only natural that I should do the housework and caregiving. Emery would say, "Kayla, wash my clothes for me. I'm wearing them to school tomorrow. Kayla, tea please." I was treated like a servant, especially by my father, who was convinced I was a neat. Indeed, I was mostly shut in my room doing telework, housework, and caregiving. But to my father, it seemed like I was just a shut-in. Even though telework was my main work mode, I still had to go to the office regularly. When I returned home, my father would sometimes be standing at the entrance, accusing me angrily.
"You're just a shut-in neat, and yet you're gallivanting around. Take care of the house properly."
His angry voice echoed throughout the house. From behind him, Emery would add, "You're really useless. Just going out to play?" I was exhausted. Every time I left the house to go to work, I would be met with insults and sarcasm from the two of them. I had made it a habit to go to my kept apartment and relax alone, tidying up the room before returning home. I was truly glad I had kept this room. The unreasonable demands and harsh treatment from my father and Emery grew stronger day by day.
"You must have some savings. Even if you're a neat, contribute money to the household."
My father, who worked me so hard, was now demanding money. "I'm going on a day trip with my friends, so give me some funds." Emery, who did nothing around the house, was begging me for pocket money. What was I to those people? Not a daughter, not a sister. The painful days continued. One time, Emery screamed, "My ring is gone, Kayla! Do you know where it is?" Of course I didn't know anything about Emery's ring, and I had no interest in it since our tastes were different. When I told her I didn't know, she stormed into my room. I was slow to react to Emery's sudden action, and I was a beat late in following her into the room. When I arrived, I heard Emery's triumphant voice from inside. "See, here's the ring. Kayla stole it, didn't she?" Emery came out of the room with the ring, pointing her finger at me and shouting. There was no way that thing was in my room. I immediately realized that Emery had set a trap. It was harassment for not giving her pocket money. Emery quickly tattled to my father, who had just come home.
Stealing Emery's things. You're truly pathetic. I don't remember raising a daughter who would steal.
No matter how much I explained, my father wouldn't believe me. Emery added, We don't need a thief, Kayla, do we?
If it weren't for your mother's care, I'd kick you out right now. Know some shame.
And so I was labeled a thief. One evening at dinner, my father suddenly became furious for reasons unknown.
You useless person. Can't even do housework properly. Making food like this. Still not contributing money to the house. Do you think your current work is enough? You're just a shut-in who gallivants around. I can't stand it anymore. I'll destroy your plaything.
My father yelled and headed towards my room. My plaything? My computer? That's my essential work tool. If it's destroyed, it would be a disaster. I followed my father to my room and protected my precious work companion, just as he was about to lay hands on my computer. Emery was watching from behind, smirking, around the time my mind and body were reaching their limits. My mother passed away peacefully. She was always grateful for my care and was pained by the way my father and Emery treated me. I felt my strength draining from my body. My heart was so shattered that I forgot to cry. Father and Emery were not only tearless, but acted as if a nuisance had been removed. Though we were in the same tearless situation, our reasons were 180 degrees apart. After my mother's funeral was quietly conducted, my father called me into the living room.
Your mother's gone, and you're no longer needed. I want you to leave immediately. We don't need a useless NEET who can't even contribute money to the house.
I had a feeling he would say something like this, but I never thought it would actually happen. I asserted my hard work up to now, but my father was adamant about me leaving. Emery added, Are you planning to stay here and be a NEET? You're such a parasite.
A parasite? That's a good word. You're like a tick or a flea.
I felt dizzy from the barrage of harsh words.
Also, about your mother's inheritance, you must renounce it. There's nothing for you.
I hadn't thought about my mother's inheritance at all. The love I received from her was enough. It was something I had never received from my father or Emery. I don't want it. I'll renounce it, and I'll leave, okay? I'll leave right away. I asked for 1 day's grace to pack, and immediately began preparations. The next day my father said,
Are you ready to move? Hurry up.
I'm leaving. I'll have nothing to do with this house or you two anymore. Goodbye. I loaded my packed belongings into the taxi I had called. I realized anew how few possessions I had. Returning to my parents' house after 9 years and leaving again. This time, I would never return. I had spent a hollow time realizing the reality of my father and Emery, but I was satisfied that I could help my mother. I returned to my kept apartment and applied to switch from telework to regular work. However, I was glad I had kept the room. My previous daily life returned. No, I worked even harder than before. I wanted to forget everything. About 3 months later, I received a call from my father, whom I had cut ties with. I didn't want to answer, but I reluctantly picked up the phone.
Hey, what's this promissory note? It's an outrageous amount, isn't it? Are you a NEET? How much are you earning a month?
Frantic, my father began firing questions, one after another. Of course I'm not a NEET. On the contrary, thanks to my dedication to my job, I believe my income is considerably higher than others my age. And I had quite a bit of savings accumulated from working. When I first started caring for my mother, I bought various equipment and tools to make her environment a little better. Knowing that the household was financially strained, I also contributed to the monthly living expenses to ease my mother's burden. Yes, long before my father demanded money for the house, I had been contributing. I even paid for Emery's tuition to alleviate my mother's worries. My mother, grateful for my various expenses, insisted on making it clear and had a promissory note drawn up between us. My financial support had amounted to a considerable sum, and that promissory note had overlaid my father and Emery in the form of a negative inheritance. As for me, I was exempt because I had renounced the inheritance. In other words, the two of them had to repay all the loans from me. After hearing the full explanation from me, my father was speechless. He screamed that he would also renounce the inheritance, but the two of them had already touched part of it, so they had no right to do so. Work hard and pay it back properly, and don't contact me anymore. I've cut ties with you. I ignored my ranting father, hung up the phone, and blocked his calls. Afterward, my uncle, my mother's brother, also suddenly caused great confusion for my father and Emery. I had met my uncle for the first time in a while at my mother's funeral, and after he noticed something was off about me, I confided everything to him. The family home was owned by my uncle, and my mother had been renting it. The right to rent passed to the two of them through inheritance, but my uncle refused to renew. Legally, tenants had the upper hand, but they couldn't stand up to my uncle, and due to their misdeeds, they ended up having to leave. My father, who had been on the restructuring list at his company for some time, was finally selected and had to leave. Emery couldn't pay tuition and had to drop out, even though graduation was near. Father and Emery, who lost their home and jobs, moved into a small apartment. Most of my father's retirement money went to repay the debt to me. It would be difficult for him to find a new job at his age. Whether Emery, a college dropout, can find a decent job is also questionable. The two of them were becoming neats in a dark, small room. Thanks to my ambitious return to work, I succeeded in acquiring new clients and launching new projects. I was promoted to the first female division head. It's a bit late for a global company to have its first female division head. I am striving to nurture the next generation and make the company more open. I only married Ethan, so you two have nothing to do with it, right? Emily, my son's fiancée, said with a smile, looking at Mike and me. You two are strangers to me, so I won't be living with you or taking care of you. I was shocked by her blunt words. As she spoke, Emily's parents stood by, nodding as if to agree completely. Emily is our precious daughter, and we've raised her with care. We can't allow her to take care of someone else's family, Emily's mother said in a sharp-tongued tone. Though I was taken aback, I answered politely, I understand. Mike and I hadn't thought for a second that we need Emily to take care of us. Yet I thought there was no need for her to say it that way. Moreover, who repeats strangers during a family introduction? I felt a little uneasy, but what Emily's true character revealed at that moment was just the beginning. My name is Michelle, and I'm 71 years old this year. My family includes my husband Mike, who is a year older at 72, and my son Ethan, who turns 42 this year. Ethan, perhaps because he's an only child, has a gentle and relaxed personality. After graduating from Science Graduate School, he works in research at a major manufacturer. After getting a job, he started living alone comfortably in a condominium near his company. Judging by the rather upscale condominium, it seems he's earning a decent salary. I'm not worried about that, but as a parent, I also hope he finds someone nice to settle down with. Of course, it's Ethan's choice, and I can't force him. That's when it happened. Ethan casually came home and reported, a little shyly, Actually, I'm dating someone right now. I'm thinking of getting married. I want to introduce her soon. Mike and I were surprised, as he had never shown any interest in women before. Sure enough, I must admit that I felt relieved. Well, isn't that wonderful? I said. These days, the number of single people is increasing, but if you found a good person, nothing could be better. So what's this person like? Mike and I eagerly asked Ethan. We'll be having a family introduction with her parents soon, so I'll introduce you to her then. Ethan said with a smile.
our conversation was livelier than ever with Ethan.
That sounds exciting,
I said nonchalantly, letting my imagination wander about who this person might be, without knowing the kind of person Ethan's partner would turn out to be. Eventually, the day of the meet and greet arrived. The location was chosen by the other parents, and it was to be an upscale fine dining restaurant. We, who weren't accustomed to such formal places, were very nervous on that day. Finally, Ethan's girlfriend and her parents arrived. Her name was Emily, 32 years old, 10 years younger than Ethan. With her charming demeanor, shiny hair, and what looked like expensive clothing, she made an impression.
"I'm Emily Thompson. Nice to meet you,"
Emily greeted crisply. Her parents, too, were dressed in high-end clothing, which made me think she must come from a well-to-do family. As it turned out, her parents run a company, and Emily works there as well. Ethan and Emily met through a mutual acquaintance, it seemed. Soon the food was served, and we talked about the wedding and other things as the family introduction went smoothly. I was thinking to myself how wonderful it was that Ethan had found a good person when something happened.
"Oh, but these formal meetups are so stuffy, don't you think? I told them I didn't think it was necessary."
Emily suddenly said, her voice shifting. I tilted my head, confused for a moment.
"I just married Ethan, so you two are not related to me,"
Emily continued, smiling at Mike and me.
"You two are strangers to me, so I won't be living with you or taking care of you."
I was shocked by Emily's sudden words. Emily's parents seemed to agree, nodding their heads.
"Emily is our precious daughter, and we can't have her taking care of someone else's family,"
Emily's mother declared firmly. Feeling shaken, but maintaining composure, I responded carefully. "I understand. Just to be clear, we haven't discussed living together or anything like that. We don't plan on it, and we have savings for our care, so we're considering using a facility in the future. I don't think Ethan or Emily will be burdened with anything."
"Oh, that's good to hear. I could never change someone else's diapers or anything like that,"
Emily said, her face beaming. Mike and I were at a loss for words, exchanging glances. Certainly the issue of living together and caregiving can be burdensome for young people. We had already discussed that we didn't intend to rely on Ethan in the future and planned to enter a caregiving facility. Even though Emily and her parents didn't know this, I was internally frustrated by her intentionally tactless way of speaking. And after the family introduction was over on our way home, Ethan came running up to us panicked. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry about what Emily said earlier. I think she was just nervous. Maybe she said too much because of that."
Ethan tried to cover for her, but all I could say was, "Well, it's fine. But she's a very frank child, isn't she?" We had our thoughts, but Mike and I understood that people nowadays are more likely to express their opinions clearly. However, Emily's words and actions seemed to escalate from there. It appears that Ethan and Emily decided to move forward with the preparations for the wedding. I talked to Ethan on the phone briefly, and he told me that the venue was in Emily's hometown, and the dates were all set according to Emily's convenience. None of Ethan's wishes seemed to have been fulfilled. Mike, having a bit of trouble with his legs, had suggested,
"Wouldn't it be better to have an accessible venue?"
But it seems he was overridden by the desire for a venue with beautiful decor. "Are you okay with that?"
I couldn't help but ask, concerned.
"It can't be helped. The wedding is mainly about the woman. Sorry to Daddy, though."
While that was indeed true, I became a little worried as Ethan's wishes were being entirely ignored.
"I need to prepare for the ceremony now. I'm busy, so I'm going to hang up."
As Ethan was about to end the call, I asked hurriedly, "You're busy, but Emily is helping, right?"
Emily is busy attending bridal beauty treatments, so I'm in charge of the details."
"I see." I had thought not to interfere in their affairs, but something seemed off. Since they said they'd come to our house on their next day off to discuss the wedding, I thought about taking the opportunity to talk to Emily a little. I don't intend to be nagging or intrusive, but since Emily is marrying my son, I thought that if I could get to know her better, I might see her good side. And so the weekend arrived. As planned, the two of them came over to our house. After chatting for a while, Ethan and Mike went out to the porch to smoke, leaving the room. Only Emily and I were left in the living room. I thought this was a good opportunity, so I spoke to Emily with a smile. "Emily, Ethan really loves hamburgers. I think he'd be delighted if you made them for him once in a while, or maybe you've already done that." When I said that, Emily opened her mouth seemingly uninterested. Is that so? I hate cooking, so I won't make it, you know. It's messy, and my parents told me I don't have to do such a thing. I prefer to eat at nice restaurants, and I don't like hamburgers, so I'd rather have pasta every day." I was stunned by her response for a moment. What was this woman talking about? "Well, Emily, you're working too, so cooking every day must be hard, so it's good to eat out once in a while." I finally managed to say that, but Emily continued. "That's what I'm saying. I'm not going to cook at all. I don't want to do anything so bothersome. Haha. And don't worry, I plan to hire a housekeeper for all the other chores. I mean, I'm going to quit my job once we're married." What? I was starting to lose comprehension. I felt a headache coming on. If you're quitting your job and not doing household chores, how will you pay that housekeeper? Emily said smugly. "Of course, Ethan will be paying for that. Haha. I'll be busy hanging out with the friends. But taking piano lessons is part of my hobbies. I don't have time for work or housework. That's why Ethan needs to earn more. To be honest, his salary is a little less than I thought. I feel like he's not trying hard enough. I want to tell him to work harder. Haha." I was at a loss for words and looked down silent. As I was doing so, Ethan and Mike returned, and the conversation was interrupted. After seeing Ethan and Emily off at the front door, I stood there filled with frustration and confusion. I knew Emily was an honest person, but would she really say all that? Or was Emily just using Ethan? Doubts rapidly spread in my mind. Mike, noticing my expression, asked me what had happened. I told him everything. Mike seemed to have the same thoughts.
"I thought it was odd when we met at that upscale fine dining restaurant, but saying all that, is Ethan okay?"
I talked to Ethan, but it seems like Emily has managed to convince him. I don't think anything we say will help.
"Yeah, I guess so."
So we have to have Emily tell us the truth herself.
"What?"
I let a smile cross my face. A few days later, I was asked to accompany Emily to her dress fitting. Ethan had said that he couldn't go because of work, so I was called at the last minute. When I appeared, Emily predictably looked displeased. "Ugh, why are you coming? Where's Ethan?" "Ethan got called into work," I answered, and Emily turned away saying, "That's so boring." I was already dumbfounded by Emily's childish attitude. Regaining my composure, I calmly watched Emily as she changed into various dresses. Emily was with Emily's mother, and they were exchanging opinions back and forth. "Mom, what do you think of this dress design?" I think the previous one was better." "You're right. The shoulder line isn't quite right." They seemed to have no regard for me, continuing their conversation just between the two of them. Even when I tried to engage them in conversation, they answered curtly. Emily's attitude was getting worse and worse, I thought to myself. Moreover, it seemed that Emily had been raised incredibly overprotected. Listening to their conversation, Emily was constantly asking her mother, "Mom, I can't do that. Can you do it for me?" Each time, Emily's mother would simply comply, saying,
Sure.
Considering this behavior, it made sense why she didn't cook.
I can't quite let go of the previous dress. Take a picture, will you?
Emily spoke to her mother, but I held up my mobile phone with a smile. I'll take the picture for you.
Really, Auntie? Do you even know how to use a mobile phone? Make sure to send it to my mobile phone once you're done.
Emily was consistently sharp-tongued. I took a few pictures and then sent them to Emily. At that moment, a staff member in charge of the dresses approached me, so I set my mobile phone on the table.
Are you the mother-in-law? This dress is now available at a more affordable price.
The staff member quickly started pitching to me. I responded vaguely and brushed it off, but Emily and Emily's mother, thinking I was focused on the conversation with the staff, started talking freely. What they were saying was astonishing.
Thank goodness we found a good cash cow, huh? Really, I'm glad he seems like a nice person. Yeah, he's a plain and unimpressive guy, but he has a decent income. His income and education are his only redeeming qualities. With that unfashionable appearance, if he couldn't marry me, he'd be single for life. His only worth is to spoil me after all. Emily, you shouldn't speak so bluntly, even if he's a stranger.
I say it because he is a stranger. That old lady was showing off too, saying she doesn't need care because she has money. She must be hoarding quite a bit. Anyway, whether there's money or not, I would never do something like caregiving. Changing a stranger's diapers? Absolutely impossible. As Emily laughed saying that, Emily's mother also started laughing. Being spoken about so openly, I felt more astonished than angry. Emily indeed showed her terrible true nature. I ended the conversation with the staff and turned back to Emily and her mother. I have plans for today, so I'll be heading home.
Is that so? Thanks anyway.
Emily responded indifferently, not even looking at me. Leaving the chattering duo behind, I walked out of the dress shop. If they consider me a stranger, I won't hold back either. My plan was already in motion. That night, Ethan and I were visiting Emily's house. It was my first time at Emily's house, and I was surprised. I had heard that Emily's house was a fairly large single-family home, and indeed it was spacious, but it was completely neglected. Weeds were growing wild, and the window glass was cracked.
What's going on, Ethan? You said you wanted to see me all of a sudden.
Emily, coming out of the house, answered nonchalantly.
I need to talk to you.
Ethan spoke quietly.
Ugh, it's late, and this is a hassle. Let's do it tomorrow.
I really need to talk to you. It's important.
Ethan, who's usually gentle, was persistent and spoke in a strong tone this time.
Were you after my money?
What? What are you talking about? Suddenly? There's no way that's true. What's happened, Ethan?
Emily started to panic.
I didn't think it was true either, but then I heard this.
Ethan said that and took out my mobile phone. He pressed the play button on the recording app. Then Emily and Emily's mother's voices were heard. As Emily listened, her face turned pale. Yes, I had recorded their conversation while matching today's outfits. I played it for Ethan after we got back home. I explained it to Ethan myself at first, but he didn't believe me. However, when he heard the certain proof of their conversation, he seemed shocked. I felt sorry for him, but I thought this was the only way to wake him up. The conversation played. They were bad-mouthing Ethan, calling him a money tree and worse.
This is some kind of mistake.
Emily stammered.
Don't make excuses.
Emily's shoulders trembled at Ethan's sudden anger. I was surprised too. I had never seen the unusually mild-mannered Ethan so angry.
I'm shocked that you thought of me that way. Even when you did whatever you wanted, I tried to bear it because I wanted to do my best to meet your wishes. But you never had any affection for me. I can't marry someone like that. The engagement is off. I'll cancel the wedding.
Ethan stated firmly, and Emily fell silent. Then, just when I thought she had been quieted, she turned on us, glaring.
If you found out, it can't be helped. But since you're the one calling off the wedding, you'll pay the cancellation fee and the compensation for breaking the engagement too.
Ethan exclaimed.
What?
She was a greedy, outrageous woman. However, I calmly told her, "Do you think you're in a position to say something like that? Aren't you the one at a disadvantage?" I challenged, holding my mobile phone up to Emily. "This audio recording is evidence. You clearly stated that you're after my son for his money. You know what will happen if this gets out, right?" My words sent Emily into a panic.
Wait a minute. Mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law? There's no reason for you to call me that. You're just a stranger in the end, aren't you? I laughed at Emily, who was at a loss for words. "As you wish. I'll treat you as a stranger forever." I held back on speaking my mind because I thought you would become Ethan's wife. But if you're a stranger, I can say whatever I want. You're a money-hungry, useless woman. Ethan deserves better than someone like you. Emily's face turned bright red, whether from anger or embarrassment, and she trembled violently. Eventually, sensing something was amiss from our exchange, Emily's parents hurried over to us.
"What's going on here?"
I responded with a smile to Emily's mother, who asked with a composed face, "This marriage is off. It seems your daughter was referring to my son as a cash cow. We'll be billing you for the compensation for the broken engagement and the cancellation fee for the venue." Emily's parents turned pale at my words and began to stammer excuses. But I had said all I needed to say, and we had no more business in this house. "Let's go," I urged Ethan, preparing to leave Emily's house. But before we left, I turned back to her parents and added one more thing. "Oh, by the way, it seems you've been neglecting the care of your home. It's unbearable to look at. Perhaps you should focus on that instead of expensive clothing." With those final words, Emily and her parents were left speechless. Without looking back, we briskly left Emily's house behind. After that, Ethan and I quickly sought legal representation and demanded compensation from Emily's family. It was for the compensation of the broken engagement and the cancellation fee for the wedding venue. In such cases, disputes often arise, hinging on he said, she said, but thanks to the recorded evidence, the process went smoothly. We won the case, and Emily's family was burdened with debt. Later on, we heard that Emily's parents' company had already gone bankrupt. They used to be wealthy, living in a large house with a housekeeper and enjoying a carefree lifestyle. But a few years ago, with the economy taking a downturn, her father's company went under. They had been struggling financially, as could be seen from the condition of their dilapidated house. Yet Emily's family couldn't give up their flashy lifestyle. Even after going bankrupt, they kept up appearances, pretending to run a business, and never stopped wearing expensive items. Emily seemed to have hardly worked at all. After her parents' company went under, working outside the home was never an option for her. She tirelessly sought someone who could lavish her with luxuries on her parents' behalf, running around introducing herself to various people in search of a partner. She claimed to be a company president and played the part of a refined lady with her whole family. But her true nature was seen through by Ethan, her finally found partner, and the engagement was called off. After that, she approached various men, but her true identity was always discovered, and now it seems no one wants to associate with her. Ethan heard rumors from acquaintances about how the whole family was in dire straits. As for Ethan's life afterwards, after a few years, he met a wonderful person, and they married right away. She's an honest, kind, and loving woman.
With her, there's nothing to worry about, he thinks. Even though a lot has happened, I'm truly glad that Ethan has found happiness. Every time I see Ethan's calm smile, both Mike and I feel a sense of joy. My name is Charlotte. I married Mickey when I was 25 after meeting him at a party. Mickey had always said,
You can be a stay-at-home wife if you want.
and indeed, we could live comfortably on Mickey's income alone. But I loved my job, and I continued to work at the company that had taken care of me since I graduated from high school. However, in the second year of our marriage, I decided to quit my job. The trigger was a phone call from father-in-law telling me that mother-in-law had collapsed. I loved my gentle and kind mother-in-law. When I rushed to mother-in-law's side alone, as Mickey couldn't make it due to work, mother-in-law greeted me with a weak smile, connected to many tubes. Mother-in-law was not in immediate danger, but her collapse had left her in need of care. We had to decide who would take care of mother-in-law before she was discharged. I thought Angelina, my unmarried sister-in-law who lived with her parents, would do it, but she firmly refused. Angelina, who mainly works from home, told the hospitalized mother-in-law, I'm not playing around at home, so I can't take care of Mom. Get it together. Mother-in-law smiled in a troubled way, but I was honestly taken aback by how someone could say such a thing when their own mother was suffering. Then Angelina, who didn't want to take care of mother-in-law, called Mickey and asked me for a meeting. At the in-laws' house, a meeting was held with father-in-law, Angelina, and us, the married couple, to discuss who will take care of mother-in-law. I really can't take care of Mom.
What should I do about the housework now that my wife has collapsed so soon?
Angelina kept saying, Impossible. And father-in-law, who had left all the housework to mother-in-law, seemed to have no intention of taking care of her. Mickey tried to persuade Angelina to take care of mother-in-law, but she firmly refused. The conclusion of this family meeting seemed predetermined. Angelina and father-in-law were indirectly telling me to take care of mother-in-law. I had some attachment to the job I had continued since graduating from high school, but I didn't want to see any more of this meeting, where they were pushing the care of mother-in-law, who had been so kind to me since I married Mickey, onto each other. So I made up my mind and said, I understand. I'll quit my job and take care of mother-in-law. We'll be living together from now on, so please treat me well. Father-in-law said,
Thank you, Charlotte.
and thanked me happily. But Angelina spat out, Of course. Mickey asked me,
Are you sure? If it's too much, we can hire a professional to take care of Mom.
but I nodded. It's okay. I really owed a lot to mother-in-law. Hiring a professional would cost money, and mother-in-law might feel hesitant. I thought it would be better for mother-in-law to be taken care of by me, a family member, even though I was her daughter-in-law. I knew that father-in-law was a vague person who wanted to avoid trouble, and Angelina had a mean-spirited personality. I was anxious about having to live with these two from now on, but I made up my mind, quit my job, and started living with my in-laws. That life was more challenging than I had imagined. Mother-in-law's body had become uncooperative, so she initially lamented needing care even to go to the bathroom. She often said, I'm sorry, to me for having to take care of her, and it was painful to see mother-in-law like that. And above all, Angelina's bullying of me as the daughter-in-law took a mental toll. My family didn't have money, and I had been working since high school without going to college, but Angelina often mocked my education. While eating the food I made and talking to father-in-law about work, she would suddenly say, Oh, sorry, Charlotte. This conversation might be too difficult for a high school graduate. I shouldn't have talked about something you can't understand. Or she would come to me, who is caring for mother-in-law, and deliberately say, You're just a lowly high school graduate daughter-in-law, so you have to at least take care of Mom. Mother-in-law with her body that couldn't move freely would scold Angelina saying, Don't say such things to Charlotte."
Angelina seemed to hate being scolded by mother-in-law. So after being sternly told by mother-in-law, she began to badmouth me when mother-in-law wasn't around. I have a respectable job at home, so it's only natural for a lowly high school graduate like Charlotte to do the housework. So sometimes make food that tastes good. It's always so bad. When Angelina, who did no housework, said this to me while I was cooking, I even thought about not serving her meal, but I held back. When she found an unclean spot, she would say loudly, "Wow, a trashy daughter-in-law. Can't tell the difference between trash. There's so much garbage piled up." But I held back then, too. I didn't want it to become known that Angelina and I were not getting along, as it would be a mental burden on mother-in-law. I endured and lied to mother-in-law, who would ask,
"Is she not being mean to you?"
with a smile saying, "I'm fine." Mickey knew Angelina's personality and often worried about me.
"Are you not pushing yourself too hard?"
he would ask, and I would lie to him too, saying, "I'm fine." I didn't want to burden Mickey, who was working hard in a company with a strict boss with family problems. Father-in-law acted as if he couldn't hear how much I was being insulted. To father-in-law, who just wanted someone to do the housework in place of mother-in-law, it probably didn't matter what was said to me. For mother-in-law? For Mickey? Inspiring myself with these thoughts, I devoted myself to mother-in-law for a year. Then, mother-in-law suddenly passed away, peacefully in her sleep.
"Mama died because you didn't take proper care of her. Such a useless, trashy daughter-in-law."
Angelina said this to me crying, as I stood in shock in front of the deceased mother-in-law. I had done my best to take care of mother-in-law, but the thought that mother-in-law might have died because of my lack of care was swirling in my head. During mother-in-law's funeral service, I was in a daze, like an empty shell the whole time. Mickey was considerate, but Angelina kept saying to me so Mickey couldn't hear, "You're really useless." With mother-in-law's funeral service over, there was no reason for me to continue living with my in-laws. As I stood alone in my suit, looking at my mother-in-law's empty bed, father-in-law pleaded with me.
"Please, Charlotte, my wife has passed away, but won't you continue to live with us?"
Father-in-law is someone who can't do any housework at all. I couldn't imagine Angelina doing housework either. Father-in-law probably wanted me to continue living with them as a housekeeper. I was astonished by this, but more than anything, I was appalled that father-in-law would plead for such a thing right after mother-in-law's funeral service had ended. I thought this man really only thinks about himself, but I didn't give an answer on the spot. I need to consult with Mickey, so I can't decide on my own. Father-in-law clung to me, saying,
"Please, I beg you."
But I only replied that I would consult with Mickey, and the conversation ended in a stalemate.
"Charlotte, Mom has passed away. There's no need to live together anymore. Let's move out, live just the two of us. You've been through a lot, haven't you?"
A few days after mother-in-law's funeral service, Mickey said this to me. I also wanted to end the cohabitation. Now that mother-in-law had passed away, there was no reason to live with Angelina, who would speak ill of me, and father-in-law, who would treat me as a housekeeper. Thanking Mickey for his consideration, we, as a couple, decided to leave my in-law's house. But that plan was completely crushed by Angelina. "What? I won't allow you to leave. Saying such a thing the moment Mom is gone is too heartless." When Mickey and I told Angelina and father-in-law that we were thinking of leaving, Angelina became furious like a raging fire.
"It's not heartless. Charlotte took really good care of Mom. She deserves to be freed now."
A high school graduate like her finding a job now is impossible. If she can't be useful to society, she should at least do housework in this house and be of some use to Dad and me.
Charlotte was excellent at her job. You have no right to say that to her.
Anyway, neither Mickey nor Charlotte has any intention of leaving this house. Because Angelina stormed out of the room after saying this, the discussion was forcibly ended, But Mickey said we could just leave on our own and started looking for a place. I also began preparing for the move, looking for properties while doing housework so as not to be complained about by Angelina and reducing our belongings. But Angelina was watching me, and when I was organizing my belongings, she would scatter them, shouting, "Heartless person! I'll never let you leave this house." Or when I was making phone calls to look for property, she would snatch my mobile phone and say to the real estate agent, "Please pretend that conversation never happened." She started to act completely out of control. Mickey would get angry at Angelina every time, but she would always yell back at him, "Your wife is the worst. You have no eye for women." And nothing would improve. One day during dinner, when Mickey and I were both at our wits' end, Angelina, in a rare good mood, called out to me, "Charlotte, tomorrow my fiancé is coming to our house. I know you're a useless piece of trash, but try to use your brainless head and read the room, okay?" I was used to being berated at the dinner table when Mickey wasn't around, but I was surprised by the word fiancé that came out of Angelina's mouth. I know it's really rude, but I was shocked to think there's a man in the world who would want to marry someone like her. After being told repeatedly during dinner to be a good girl, I responded vaguely and ended the day doing housework as usual. And then the next day, Angelina, dressed more stylishly than I had ever seen her, brought her fiancé Randolph. Angelina's fiancé was wearing a well-fitted suit, was polite, and seemed intelligent. Why would such a seemingly decent person want to marry Angelina? I thought, again rudely, as I prepared drinks and headed to the living room where father-in-law, Angelina, and Randolph were. Then I heard Angelina's cajoling voice coming from the living room. "That spaced-out girl earlier is Mickey's wife. She really can't do anything. I do all the housework in our house, and I worked hard to take care of our deceased mom. I think Mom could have lived longer if that girl hadn't stressed her out." I froze in the front of the living room. I felt as if I had been struck from behind by Angelina's words. The shock woke me up. Because I didn't want to burden Mickey or mother-in-law, I had been holding back. But now, it felt like all those feelings were flooding out. I did all the housework. I worked hard to take care of mother-in-law. All of it was me. Angelina never helped me with anything. I opened the living room door, quietly served the drinks, and greeted Randolph with a smile. "Hello, as you were introduced, I'm the high school graduate, bottom of the barrel, useless trash. Nice to meet you." Angelina let out a panicked shout, but I kept talking smoothly. Angelina really guides me well. She evaluates every meal I make as tasteless, and when I'm cleaning, she comes to laugh, saying that the trash is cleaning up trash. She often scolded me for my caregiving, saying that mother-in-law died early because of my incompetence. "You? What are you saying?" Pointing at Angelina, who was furious like a demon and smiling. "See, she's guiding me like that." Angelina pulled my hair and yelled, "Stop it!" Randolph must have never seen her like this before. He looked confused, saying, What? And I felt sorry for him. But this should make him reconsider marrying Angelina. I felt like I had saved him, so I excused myself in mind for causing this chaos. "Well then, the trash will leave now." I left the in-laws' house with only my valuables. Father-in-law, wanting to avoid trouble, just sat silently during my counterattack. Seeing Angelina's furious rage, and Randolph almost crying as he tried to calm her down, was refreshing. I left the in-laws' house and took refuge in my parents' home. When I explained the situation to my parents, they were appalled by Angelina's behavior and father-in-law's indifference and told me, "From now on, do as you please, Charlotte." While enjoying a relaxing time at home for the first time in a while, Mickey came to my parents' house at night. Mickey had come home to be yelled at by Angelina. "It's all your wife's fault." Giving up on getting a coherent story from the furious Angelina, Mickey somehow learned from father-in-law that I had left and came to me, even though he was tired after work.
We should have moved out forcibly sooner. I knew that my sister and father had been tormenting Charlotte all this time, and I'm sorry I couldn't help. From now on, I'll always protect Charlotte. So, if you're okay with me, I want you to stay with me as my wife forever."
Mickey, you've always tried to protect me, haven't you? I'm sorry for ruining Angela's engagement. Even Angelina, as she is Mickey's blood-related sibling. Mickey hugged me as I apologized and repeatedly told me,
"Charlotte, you did nothing wrong."
I stayed at my parents' house for a while, and Mickey moved my belongings. Afterwards, Mickey and I found a nice property, moved there, and were able to start a peaceful life. We received calls from Angelina and father-in-law every day, but we blocked them. According to Mickey, Angelina's engagement was called off. Randolph was taken aback by the overly excited Angelina and said,
"I need to think about marriage,"
and then became unreachable. Angelina was crying and yelling at Mickey. "It's your wife's fault." But Mickey calmly replied,
"Charlotte just told the truth."
Father-in-law seemed desperate after losing his housekeeper, his daughter-in-law. He asked Mickey,
"Can you bring Charlotte back?"
But Mickey said,
"I'm cutting ties with this house,"
and left the in-laws' house. As for me, I found out I was pregnant a few months after leaving the in-laws' house. When I told Mickey, he was thrilled, and he changed jobs from the strict company where he was working, saying,
"I can't raise our child together with my current job."
Mickey decided to change jobs. I believe he's trying to keep the promise he made when he came to pick me up at my parents' house, that he would protect Charlotte. Since we've cut off contact with the in-laws, we haven't reported that we're having a child. I think there's no need to report it, as I'm sure that even if Angelina and father-in-law knew I was having a child, their attitudes wouldn't change. Now that my belly has grown, Mickey and I are looking forward to the birth of our child and living happily day by day.
My name is Charlotte. I've been married to my husband Derek for almost 7 years. We don't have children, but we enjoy our daily life just the way it is. When people hear that we don't have children, they often ask, "Don't your in-laws say anything? Are you okay?" But there's never been anything like that. When we told my in-laws that we were having trouble conceiving, I was nervous that they might say something. But both my father-in-law and mother-in-law didn't blame me at all and simply said, "Thank you for telling us." My mother-in-law even said, "If you two are happy, that's enough." I remember feeling embarrassed and crying right then and there. We told my in-laws about our situation after 3 years of marriage. Almost 4 years have passed since then, and I still have a good relationship with my in-laws. There's never been any bad treatment, and we regularly stay in touch, even going out to eat together. One day while I was at work, I got a call from my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law has always been sensible and never called me during work before, so when I got the call, I knew something must have happened. Feeling anxious, I stepped away from my desk and answered the phone quickly. "Mother-in-law? What's wrong?" Then my mother-in-law said, panting over the phone, Your father-in-law has... Father-in-law? What happened to my father-in-law? Your father-in-law? He's been taken in an ambulance." "What?" I told my boss what happened and left work early. My mother-in-law said she'd also contacted my husband, but he never checks his phone during work, so he didn't notice. I called my husband's office, explained the situation, and asked to speak to him. After understanding what had happened, my husband said, "I'll head to the hospital now. Please, go there too, Charlotte." My husband and I arrived at the hospital at almost the same time and were able to meet near the reception. As we were about to look for mother-in-law, my brother-in-law Eugene spotted us and called out, "Brother, sister-in-law, over here." We followed Eugene to father-in-law's hospital room as he directed, but by the time we got there, it was too late. In the room, my mother-in-law was crying loudly and my sister-in-law, Marie, was holding back tears. Father-in-law had passed away, looking like he was asleep. I can't believe it, father-in-law." I couldn't help but let tears flow. My husband and brother-in-law comforted me and the others, but when I stepped out into the hallway, both of them were covering their faces with their hands. As the daughter-in-law, I was overwhelmed with tears, so I can only imagine how much sadder my husband and brother-in-law, the actual sons, must have felt. I thought they probably wanted to cry as much as mother-in-law. I thought so. The funeral for father-in-law was over in the blink of an eye, and about 2 weeks had passed when my husband and I were told by my mother-in-law that she wanted to talk to us on our next day off, so we headed to her house. When we arrived, my brother-in-law and his wife were already there, and mother-in-law said, "I'm glad she came. Come on, sit down, sit down." She seated us, and then my husband asked, "Mother, what's the talk about?" With a serious look on her face, mother-in-law looked at us and said, "Mom, about the talk." When my husband starts like that, mother-in-law looks at us with a serious face and says, "Thank you all for helping out with Dad's funeral. Thanks to you, everything went smoothly. Thank you," mother-in-law says, bowing her head. Her son-in-law responds, "What are you talking about, Mom? We're family, after all." We all nod in agreement with his words. Then, with an apologetic look on her face, mother-in-law starts, "And there's something I gathered you all here to ask." She then explains why she called us. She's feeling uncertain about living alone after father-in-law's death. The family home is aging and she's considering rebuilding, and if possible, she wants to live with either our family or her son's family. Mother-in-law keeps saying, "I'm sorry for being so selfish." It's not selfish at all. She's getting old, and after losing father-in-law so suddenly, it's natural for her to feel vulnerable. I would like to live with her if we can, but we live quite far from her, and with our work, moving here isn't possible. "I'm sorry, Mom, we can't do it right now." When my husband says that, my mother-in-law drops her shoulders. "I understand." Then my brother-in-law says cheerfully, "We'll live with you." "But Eugene, you work at a company, don't you?" I ask. He smiles and says, "My company is pushing for remote work now, and many are moving to the countryside. Since Marie is a housewife, I think it's better if we live together." His wife agrees. "Yes, it will be reassuring." Mother-in-law sheds tears of joy. My husband and I feel a bit guilty for leaving everything to them, but if this makes mother-in-law feel a bit more comfortable, we want them to do it. "Eugene, are you sure? We're leaving it all to you." To that question he replies, it's fine. Just come and help us if something happens." We agreed to let them take care of mother-in-law as long as we help if needed. About a year later, a new house is built and mother-in-law lives with them. 2 years later, they have a daughter, Cecilia, and mother-in-law is delighted. Since we don't have children, our niece is very dear to us, and we visit the new family home about once a month. But 7 years later, just before the 10th anniversary of father-in-law's death, we get sudden news. My brother-in-law has died. My husband and I rushed to the hospital, but like with father-in-law, we're too late. It was so sudden that we thought it was an accident or a sudden ailment, but it turned out to be cancer. About a year ago, they found cancer in him, and it was already in the final stages. Because of his youth, it progressed quickly, spreading to his bones. Despite trying various treatments, he passed away. He had told mother-in-law and his wife not to tell us so as not to worry us. "I'm sorry for keeping silent." Mother-in-law and sister-in-law kept bowing their heads to us, apologizing again and again. But we couldn't take our frustration on them. They had to be suffering more than us living together in such close quarters. Just like when father-in-law passed, the funeral was over in a flash, and about a month and a half went by. That day, after work, we were watching a movie together at home. Suddenly, my husband's phone rang. It was mother-in-law saying, "Marie told me to leave the house."
"What? Marie? You're joking, right?"
My husband asked, half joking, but mother-in-law started crying and shouting, "It's true! She said she wants me to leave as soon as possible." We couldn't believe it. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law were usually close, like real mother and daughter. Even when the brother-in-law passed away, they cooperated and helped each other through it. No matter how much my husband tried to verify the truth, mother-in-law insisted that sister-in-law was trying to kick her out. He said, "I'll come over tomorrow. Wait until then," and hung up the phone. "Marie kicking out your mother? That's impossible, right?" When I asked my husband, he seemed to agree, saying, "I think so too, but Mom doesn't need to lie. Anyway, I'll check it out tomorrow." The next day, my husband had the day off from work, so he went to his family's house in the morning, but didn't return home until after midnight. He looked exhausted when he got home and told me what happened today while drinking a beer. When he arrived at his family's home, the atmosphere was already tense, and neither mother-in-law nor sister-in-law would speak to each other. When he sat them down on the sofa to talk, the sister-in-law said, "I have no choice but to ask mother-in-law to leave." "How can you say that? This was originally my house," mother-in-law shouted, and the conversation broke down. My husband asked sister-in-law why she wanted mother-in-law to leave, but she just said, "I can't tell you. It will also affect you if we continue like this." But I had no idea what she was talking about. Mother-in-law was also getting angrier because of the sudden demand to leave and finally yelled at the sister-in-law, "If you don't like it, you leave." My husband calmed her down and came home. I felt tired just listening to the story. We don't know why sister-in-law started saying these things, but She's alone with no parents or relatives and has children. If she leaves that house, life will be tough. Isn't there a better way? I thought for a while, but without knowing my sister-in-law was saying this, we couldn't move forward. I suggested to my husband, and we decided to go to his family's house together the next day. When we arrived, it was just as my husband had said. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law were already arguing when we arrived, and our 7-year-old niece, Cecilia, was trying to mediate. Hey, both of you, stop it. Cecilia's here too. My husband stopped the two of them arguing. But Marie is... Because mother-in-law won't leave. And so the two continued to glare at each other, angry and agitated. I urged them to calm down for the moment, saying, both of you, please calm down. Let's talk this through. Then I sat them down on the sofa. My husband made coffee, and it helped the two of them relax. After they both drank some coffee and seemed to have calmed down, I started the conversation. So to get to the point, first of all, Marie, why did you tell your mother-in-law to leave? I asked, but my sister-in-law just hung her head in silence. My mother-in-law said with disbelief, you just hate me, don't you? That's why you want me to leave. My sister-in-law snapped back, raising her face. Hate? If anything, aren't you the one who hates me? And tears fell from her eyes. An unexpected turn of events left my husband and me in shock. There was no way my mother-in-law could hate her. We could see that just by watching them. Marie, your mother-in-law doesn't hate you. You're her precious son's wife. With those words, something broke inside my sister-in-law, and she began to cry uncontrollably. I patted her back, waiting for her to calm down. After a while, when her breathing seemed to have stabilized, I asked, can you tell me what happened? Actually, my aunt told me that things will be miserable if they continue like this. What? Your aunt? When I asked this, she slowly began to speak. Once I heard everything, I felt like my anger was going to explode. It wasn't just me. My husband and mother-in-law felt the same. What she told us was unbelievable. According to her, after her husband died, she met Aunt, my father-in-law's sister, at the funeral, who spoke to her. Aunt warned my sister-in-law who was going to live with my mother-in-law. That woman is really wicked, you know. You, your daughter, none of you will be treated well. She used to bully the wife of her eldest son. She just hid her true nature because her son was around. Now you'll see how. She repeatedly scarred her with terrifying words. Furthermore, she wickedly whispered that since my brother-in-law contributed money to the new house, she had the right to live there and should kick out the mother-in-law. At first, my sister-in-law didn't believe it, but hearing that I had been bullied by my mother-in-law frightened her. Of course, I was never bullied by my mother-in-law. It was a complete lie. If only you had checked with me. Crying, she apologized. I'm truly sorry. The whole incident was clearly Aunt's fault. Aunt, my father-in-law's sister, had always been antagonistic towards my mother-in-law and kept saying nasty things, as I later learned from my mother-in-law. Of course, my sister-in-law also has some responsibility for believing Aunt completely, but I thought anyone would be scared if told such things when emotionally unstable after losing her husband. My mother-in-law, learning everything, said, So that's what happened. But Marie, do you think I'll do such a thing in the future? I think of you as my own daughter. Smiling and shedding tears. Even my sister-in-law never truly believed that my mother-in-law was that kind of person. Mother-in-law, I'm really sorry. She said this, tears in her eyes as she bowed her head. After that, we went to Aunt's house and spoke about the matter in front of her husband. It seemed like she did it just for fun, but she defended herself. That's not it. It was just a small joke. But even if it was a joke to Aunt, it almost ruined our lives. Of course, neither my husband nor I could forgive her. Aunt kept insisting that she wasn't in the wrong, but Aunt's husband, unable to watch her any longer, yelled, Enough! It's all your fault. Apologize. Aunt's face turned pale, and eventually it seemed she was confronted with divorce. I later heard that she was kicked out of the house, left with almost nothing. Many things have happened, but my mother-in-law and sister-in-law are still living together. This incident led them to be more open and honest with each other, it seems. Even when we went to visit, there were more arguments and squabbles. However, it wasn't something that made us uneasy to watch, but rather something that we understood to be the result of trust. Somehow, both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law seemed more lively than before. My mother-in-law adores her cute grandchild, and now she's even thinking about adopting my sister-in-law. I guess there's nothing to worry about anymore. Strangely enough, even the pictures of my father-in-law and brother-in-law on the wall seem to be smiling more than before.